You are listening to Fantha Tracks.
Because of the following special program, Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk will not be presented this evening.
It's time to get all your Star Wars news in a single file. This is Making Tracks. Here are your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
That's not true. That's impossible.
You're listening to episode 49 of Making Tracks. I'm your co-host Mark Newbold, and joining me today is a man who wouldn't know the difference between a Hoojib or a sliverlith if it came up and licked his hand. Mark, welcome to the show.
A what? A sliff? Is that from Harry Potter?
No, it's from Star Wars. We don't talk Harry Potter in here.
Yeah, sorry, that must be the Pottercast that I'm on as
That's
well.
That's the one.
Hey, look, I know what a Hoojib is, and I do have kind of Hoojibs, the kids' book from, 86, 87 or whenever it was.
Yeah.
The other thing, a sliverlith or where it is, I'm going to have to find out about that, I think.
You have to go back and have a good listen. It is actually from the same story, but
Okay.
It's probably been a while since you've listened to it. We've got loads to get through on this episode. We've got the second part of our interview with Becca Benjamin, talking about Shmi Skywalker, which went down really, really well last week. Lots of good comments about that, so thank you very much. And we'll chunk into the news. So let's just do it, Mark. Let's just dive straight into the news. First piece of news,
Punch it.
and it's a sad bit of news. Wilford Brimley, Noah from Battle for Endor, passed away last week. Sad news, obviously sad news when we lose anyone from the Star Wars galaxy, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And I guess it's one of those things that I think we kind of have to get maybe a little bit not used to, but it's just part of getting older, isn't it, really, unfortunately. And Wilford was awesome. He was in quite a few different films, like Cocoon, which actually I remember watching several times, rather fondly, actually. I thought that was quite poignant of a film, actually, considering what we're talking about now. But also believe he was quite a big campaigner, or was involved a lot with diabetes awareness.
Yeah, I believe he was a diabetic himself, so I think it was something that was probably quite close to his heart. Yeah, you mentioned Cocoon, that's a biggie. That was very much from that sort of mid-80s era. I mean, Ron Howard directed it, obviously our solo director, pretty early on in his directing career. Pretty much his first film after Splash, I think, which was a massive hit. And ILM worked on it as well, so it's one of those sort of mid-80s ILM projects when they seem to be involved in every big major blockbuster film, and it was a big hit, and of course they did a sequel as well. But yeah, it was terribly sad. I mean, another actor that's passed away, so terrible shame. But Wilford Brimley, 85 years old, so not a bad innings, all being said. Other news, Cassian, Diego Luna has come out and said, essentially, what's the rush? There's no rush. We want to get this right. If we're going to push on with movie production and TV production, let's do it right. What did you think about that? I think people could misread his comments almost, but I think it's pretty clear what he's saying, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. I don't know how many people know this, but both Diego's kids caught the coronavirus fairly early on, so he's obviously got a very close perspective on it, and I think that probably will be the big motivator behind that sentiment. There's also that notion of which we're seeing now really in the UK, aren't we, where things have opened up and now things are having to be, or towns and areas be put back into lockdown just because the R rate's increasing, so people are contracting it again. It's not like it has gone and life is going back to normal. This is going to be with us for the foreseeable, however long it's going to be until they can develop a vaccine and then also get it out to the population, for the world. With filming, unfortunately, sometimes you are on sets which aren't particularly big.
Yeah.
You're there for a long time with a number of people, and so it's obviously difficult to manage sometimes being COVID secure. And the thing is, it's even as I've noticed, I think everybody is very much aware when you're out shopping and you see perfect strangers with masks on and stuff like that, and you're like, I don't know this person, I don't know where they've been or if they've had it or if they may have it and not be aware of it. But then when you start working with people, you kind of guard drops a little bit because you kind of, they're your colleagues, they're your workmates and stuff. And whilst we don't tend to get super, super close to people, I think we get into a slightly relaxed state of security that actually I know Jeff or I know Adam or whoever. I don't think they've had it. So we can talk and not worry about that kind of stuff. So yeah, so coming back to it, I think Diego's right. Working in TV, we've been very much taking things slowly, and with live broadcasts and stuff, you kind of work in a bubble. So you can only socially interact with the people you work with. So if you're going off to do a film, the number of people who are in that crew is a lot bigger than, let's say, a TV outside broadcast. If you're working in a truck, there may be, say, 10 or 15, 20 people in there. Those would be your bubble and you would only can interact with them. So he's right. I think it's better to be cautious and take things slowly rather than jump straight back into it and then have to stop again.
Yeah, you know? Productions are expensive enough as it is. And we've talked about this a lot on the show. I mean, unusually for a show hosted by two guys from the UK, the main topic of conversation hasn't been the weather; it's actually been coronavirus. You know, and we've covered a lot of ground really talking about this and the effect that it could have on Star Wars. And obviously, we've already lost the convention season's gone and film production slowed down. And I mean, it seems like The Mandalorian's on course for its October launch, which is great news. But you know, a lot of other things have been pushed back. The film's been pushed back 12 months because of this, and a lot of other things. And you've got to wonder what, and again, we talked about it on a recent episode, you know, the advances of stagecraft has got to have given production managers and the people counting the beans, you know, costings and such, has got to give them a lot of options to go, well, do we really need to fly out to Jordan? Can't we just do this in the volume? And you've got to wonder whether or not production of things like Kenobi and here, Cassian, do they need to be out on location? When we saw on The Mandalorian, so beautifully done, we had no idea that they didn't go out on location, that was all shot in a room. You know, you've got to wonder whether or not they could do something similar on a lot of productions. It's a good message to say, you know, what is the rush? It is just a TV show, and you will be getting it. You know, if you get it 12 months later than planned, does it really matter? No, of course it doesn't. I mean, it matters to Disney, but they're going to want to get it moving. But, you know, there's a lot of spinning plates, you know, a lot of things to account for here. So it's a good message. And you just said it. His kids had it really early on. I mean, that was one of the earliest things we heard, was that his kids had got it. So it's a very personal thing to him. But it's still happening. That's the big news. It's happening. It's not been cancelled. It's still going ahead.
That's the thing that we need to take away from this, is that actually it's still happening. And I think, like you said, for us fans, yes, it would be great to have it when it's meant to originally be planned to be released. But if we have to wait, then we have to wait. And there's nothing we can do about it. And I think everybody would much prefer for the show to take an extra 6 or 12 months and for us to know and feel reassured that our favourite actors and crew are all safe doing it, rather than potentially putting themselves at risk just so that we've got something to talk about in a future podcast.
I'm Gareth Edwards, and you're listening to Making Tracks on Fantha Tracks Radio.
So those of you that follow the Fantha Tracks Radio feed will have noticed a new show has dropped onto there over the last couple of days, The Running Stormtrooper. People in the UK will know The Running Stormtrooper better as Jez Allinson, who's been running for charity since 2016 and has raised thousands so far, raising money for Make-A-Wish and Spread a Smile. He does a podcast with his co-host Stuart Skinner, an independent podcast that gets great views on it and great listens, but you can always spread the news further and farther and wider. So the guys, Jez and Stuart, have joined up with Fantha Tracks to present their show, The Running Stormtrooper, on Fantha Tracks Radio. So we launched with episode 7. We will be bringing episodes 1 to 6 over the next few weeks, rolling them out and then pushing forward onwards from there as he tries to raise as much money for charity as he possibly can and run 1,000 miles. He's had all sorts of obstacles. Obviously, COVID and the coronavirus has been a major obstacle, because all the avenues that he would use to run at, like Celebration and running around Pinewood and all the other things that he would do, have been stopped. So he's kind of been cut off at the knees. So we want to help Jez and Stuart spread the word about what the Running Stormtrooper is all about, get the word out, get some corporate sponsorship, push, and help as much as we can. So please give it a listen. It's an interesting show. It's very specific. It is about Jez's journey as the Running Stormtrooper. And if you've ever read StarWars.com, there's stories about Jez on there. Stories about him all over the internet. He had 2 million views on Lad Bible of him running through his local village dressed as a Stormtrooper. So he's out there. So give him a listen. Follow the show, Running Stormtrooper. It's part of Fantha Tracks Radio. And let us know what you think of the show. Email us radio@fanthatracks.com. So if you listen to episode 48 of Making Tracks, you would have heard the first part of my chat with Becca Benjamin, best known as being the co-host of Kanata's Castle and Tarkin's Top Shelf, and also a member of the Planet Leia team. We spoke specifically about Shmi Skywalker, take a look at the character, what she's all about, and the potential future of where they might want to take this character, who really is a keystone of the Skywalker clan.
I would give money, you know, I mean, to me, there's a story there. And like you said, I think it's safer for them now to go back to it because, like you said, all 9 stories are now done.
Yeah.
So to contradict, the chances of that are very few, you know. And that's the beauty of what they've done, I would say this, with the Disney stories now that they have given us the new canon, so to speak, with the books, is that there's very few hiccups. If you go through the EU or the Legends, now that they call it, there was a lot of points where it was like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't really go with what I just read in this, you know. So they are making sure things, you know, check out, you know. So I think now is the time. And we've always learned in Star Wars about the Father. You know, it's always been about the Father and the, you know, Father and the Son, Father and the Son. You know, we even have that at the end of The Rise of Skywalker. We have Ben with his dad, you know. And granted, I know you could only do so much because of real life with Carrie Fisher. I get that. But now's the time. Let's bring some mothers into it. It's always been short-lived. Look at Lyra and Jyn. Within the first 5 minutes of Rogue One, Lyra's gone. Yeah. You know, let's get some more mom stories out there. I think we need that. I mean, these poor kids throughout the galaxy far, far away have lost families in really harsh ways. It would be good to see some positive elements thrown in there now.
Yeah,
so
that's a great thought in the sense that through the 3 trilogies we've watched, and we talked about it on the last episode of Making Tracks, actually, and you may know the answer to this, so you might answer something that we were talking about in the last episode straight away, but we said, you know, you had the Clone Wars, a very defined, and we know what the Clone Wars is and what it was about, why it happened, and all the details. And similarly, the Galactic Civil War, a very defined period of history. For the most part, obviously, we thought it ended at Jedi. It didn't. It bubbled on for a few years. But, you know what that was. The wars of the Resistance and the First Order, it doesn't have a name. I don't think it's got a defined name like the Clone Wars or the Galactic Civil War. But my point being is that you see it in Last Jedi. There's kids who are living on hard times and rough, you know, living on nothing and fueled by kids' dreams, which in the Star Wars galaxy is this hero Luke Skywalker or this heroine Rey or whoever it might be, this stormtrooper that came good or whoever, whatever fairy tales these kids tell themselves, because, you know, playground talk is always 10 times more impactful to a kid in their head than it would be to an adult. So it's that hope aspect that fuels the future of the galaxy. But every single trilogy has got, well, it's Star Wars for a reason, isn't it? It's at the background of these tremendous conflicts. And your point about wanting to see more mothers and sons, mothers and daughters, fathers and daughters. You saw it with Bail and Leia, but we never saw much of that. But there aren't hardly, as you say, any mother-daughter stories. We've got Disney Plus now. We've got Marvel back doing comics. We've got multiple book companies putting fictional stories out. Definitely a rich tapestry of stories to be told there, isn't there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, there's room there. I mean, I'm just so saddened. I mean, I think because I'm looking at Star Wars differently now. You know, I'm no longer that, you know, little kid, you know, watching Luke and Leia with the stars in my eyes to think, oh, I want to be like that. Now, you know, you look at it and you're older and it's like you're looking at the families and these kids now that are coming up into it and you're like, they had it so hard. Like, that's so not right. Like, where is their like structure? Where are they coming from? You know, how are they supposed to make the right choices if there's not that positivity in their life? So that's why I think Rey really stands out, because really out of so many people, she had every right to be angry and to go off crazy like, right?
Yeah.
But somehow she pulls it all in and makes the right choice. And I really think it goes to show you that when she needed that training most, she got it from the right master, and that would be Leia. I think Leia, without that calmness that Leia has, you know, to be able to put Rey in check, if she didn't have that, I think she would have made the wrong choice at the end. Granted, I know it's only for a year, but she really was with Leia longer than she was with Han, and then she was with Luke.
Yeah.
And Luke was a grumpy old man.
Well, I think it's, you know, the Luke relationship with Rey in Last Jedi is almost like Luke going to Dagobah and not being trained by the calm, chilled out Yoda that reveals himself, but by the crazy Yoda that's sort of hitting R2 with his stick. It would have been completely different. And like you say, Rey and Leia, obviously we see it in Force Awakens, the hug, and they sort of come together straight away. It's almost unspoken that they both know that there's something special about the other. I mean, obviously Leia's a galactically known person, so it is different, of course, and everything that's happened to them in that moment. And of course, like you say, the sequel trilogy takes place just over a year, isn't it? Really, it's fairly compact in that sense. Whereas the prequel trilogy is 13 years. It's a much broader scope, but nevertheless, they do come to each other. So there's definitely that shared something.
Oh, yeah, there's definitely Rey received the nurturing that she needed. And I really think that's one of the things that shined through to Leia that I can see in Shmi was that, she allows her family, so to speak, Leia and Shmi with Anakin, to find their own way to lead. She doesn't tell them exactly how to do it. She gives them that openness and loose rein, so to speak, to find it on their own.
Yeah. With
the whole concept of you need to be patient. It'll happen. Constantly giving them that confidence that they'll find it within themselves. And I think Shmi was very big on that with Anakin. Look at all the stuff that he would bring home. 3PO, all of it. She never discouraged it because that was the way he was going to find his way. And I think Leia was very similar with that with Rey, because Rey was so down and out about some point I will earn your brother's saber.
Yeah.
She felt like she had to earn it. And Leia knew that she was worthy of it from the beginning. But Rey had to discover that for herself. And I think that was something Shmi even upheld, even with Anakin. She's like, this choice is yours and it's yours alone. She wasn't going to pick it for him. Because I think if Shmi wanted to, of course she wasn't going to let her son go. She loves her son, but he had a better shot out there doing what he was meant to do.
Yeah.
And I think in a way, the more we talk about this, I wonder deep down if Shmi had that foresight in her. Did she, like Leia, have a vision at some point or haunted by visions or nightmares that if she kept Anakin, he would become something horrible?
I'm Anthony Daniels, and you are listening to Fantha Tracks. Well done.
There's a very sort of practical element to Rey and to Shmi in the sense they're both grafters, they're both hard workers. They're not afraid to put a shift in. Shmi will work for Watto, and Anakin's got this innate, natural sort of aptitude for mechanics and stuff like that. So it felt, on one hand, she was preparing Anakin for a life of, vocational life. He's good with his hands and he's a quick thinker, and he'll do okay living this life on Tatooine if something else doesn't come along. But by the same token, something else does come along. And not only is it, Shmi it's the most wide-eyed she sounds in the whole film. Is he to become a Jedi? Almost like she's surprised by it. Almost like, she knows he deserves it. She knows he's special. Qui-Gon says it. You know he can read. You know he can see the future. You know he can do it. He's thinking ahead of everybody. It's there. And she knows it's there. She knows he's special. But there's almost that humble, you know what I mean? There's a humble element to her as well. And Rey, almost like you've just said perfectly, about her earning the blade. She took, she didn't want the blade from Maz in the castle at first part because the visions, it was too much for her, and she's obviously spent all those years longing for her parents. As soon as they land on Takodana and hand offers her the job, she's like, I need to get back to Jakku. And it just almost becomes a joke, doesn't it? Why does everyone want to go back to Jakku? But, she feels like she's missing out on, it's not FOMO, but it's like she feels like what if they came when I was away? It's that fear of missing out. There are more parallels between those two characters. I wonder if when JJ and his writers were sitting down to plot this out, and obviously Rian Johnson, of course, when they were working out the storyline, whether that ever came into the conversation, that you look back to a character that we really only got a vignette of really in Phantom Menace, but he's so key to the whole thing.
I hope so. Thankfully, a mutual friend of ours, Eric Okenout, he shared with me, he took a close-up image of, I believe it was from the documentary of The Rise of Skywalker, of Tario's desk, and on the desk was a copy of Aftermath. So I'm hoping that they really dove back into the family circle, as we're calling it, and maybe they were hitting those notes. So at some point, as those conversations grow, which we know we've been having them for how many years? through these movies, that this is what we start talking about. And this is how stories come about. We do know this, and look how long it took for them to write and to produce Rogue One.
Yeah.
I mean, A New Hope was already out there for how many years when they did it? Almost 40, correct?
Yeah.
So it was like 39 years, I think. And then there is Rogue One on the screen. A story based on how did they get those plans. That's it. All on the plans, just one thing. So again, even look at, the Dark Times, the Clone Wars. Now we have 7 seasons of this animated series, right? Just based on that one line. So it's possible that they could give us this based on something, so fingers crossed that maybe we're right about something.
Wouldn't that be nice?
Because then we can go back and say, hey, we called it, that would be nice. And it reminds me of the time when we first spoke on, oh my gosh, this is going way back, before The Force Awakens.
Yeah.
And we knew it was coming, and you asked me that one question, what is the one thing that I want to see? I didn't get it in The Force Awakens, but I did get it in The Rise of Skywalker, and that was, I want to see Leia wield a lightsaber. And I got that.
Yeah.
So may not have been the way I wanted it, but I still got it. And that's one thing that I've always said about Star Wars. We all want something, right? We all have this vision in our head, this headcanon, if you will.
Yeah.
And sometimes we get what we never really wanted, but it ended up being the thing that we needed. So here's to hoping that I may not get the Shmi story that I want, but somehow Shmi may turn up and it may be just what I needed. So I'm hoping for that.
I love that sentiment. I absolutely love that. Where can people find you? If they want to hear you, if they want to contact you, where's the best place to get hold of Becca?
Wow. Oh, that's crazy. I'm all over now. It's really weird. So I do have, it's a work in progress. We do have a network now. It's called Pitiful Little Band. You can find that on YouTube, on Twitter, and on Facebook. And that is just a collective group of Star Wars creators, as we like to call ourselves. And that's Idiots Array, of course, Tarkin's Top Shelf, and Kanata's Castle. So you can actually hear me or see me on that YouTube channel. You can listen to me at Tarkin's Top Shelf. We are everywhere. Kanata's Castle, we are everywhere. So wherever you catch your pods, we should show up. Best place to say hi to me personally is on Twitter, and that is at YouAreAngelB. And and just shoot me a line, and I'll be glad to say hi.
Wonderful. Well, thank you for giving us so much time. We will definitely speak again, because there's so much we've sort of unpacked here that I hope it gets other people thinking. I'm sure there's more stories from Shmi to come, and when they do, we will talk again. But for the time being, Becca, thanks so much for being our guest.
Thank you for having me. May the Force be with you.
So there's been some figures released by Parrot Analytics on Friday about the numbers of viewing and downloads of various different shows over the last year or so, based on the first week's launch of a series. And looking at the graph, which we've got on Fantha Tracks, it shows that both The Mandalorian and Clone Wars basically just blew everybody else out of the water. The Mandalorian is ridiculously high compared to any of the other competitors for Apple TV, HBO Max or Peacock.
To say it was a success is almost an understatement, isn't it? It was multiples more than anything else. I mean, the nearest to it, like you said, was the Clone Wars. And there's some good shows on Apple that seem to be pretty high. HBO Max got the Looney Tunes cartoon, which is really high on there. Peacock, which is only just launched, which is the NBC streaming service, I believe. It's got some decent numbers, but Mandalorian is just miles and away, far and away, the biggest, like I say, with Clone Wars just edging ahead of For All Mankind on Apple. So, yeah, stupid numbers. I mean, when you think we've been talking about disappointments at the box office, which is always an odd barometer to sort of measure against, because you're only ever comparing really Star Wars to other Star Wars. And then you look at television, which isn't Star Wars' natural home, and then you see how Mando has done. And also, I mean, looking at the numbers, I mean, when Disney Plus launched, it had 10 million sign-ups in the first 24 hours. And right now it's at 60, which, from what I understand, is way ahead of where they expect it to be. You can't define Mandalorian as anything other than just a ridiculously successful show. Looking back over the last 4 or 5 years, I think probably with the exception of Stranger Things, The Mandalorian has probably been the one big must-watch on any streaming service. I mean, it's definitely the show that has probably brought so many
subscriptions to Disney Plus. And with season 2 actually not that far away now, which seems crazy to think. It should only be October that it's getting released. You'd like to think that those figures will probably get another bump when they start promoting that and people start maybe going, actually, you know what, I'm going to take the dive and catch up, binge Mandalorian season 1 and then watch season 2. The figures don't even compare to any of the competitors. We could still talk about this even if you removed the Mandalorian from the equation. For Clone Wars, which has been out for 7 series and was derided by so many for such a long period of time, is still higher than any of Apple TV's offerings, which is testament to the fact that Star Wars is all about good storytelling.
And also, as well, obviously, it's owned by Disney, so it's not going to come out anywhere other than Disney Plus. But it really just speaks strongly to how big of a brand and how powerful of a brand Disney is, because you look at those figures for Mando Season 1 and Clone Wars, like you just said, Clone Wars Season 7, a show we never thought we'd get, and comes back and does those kind of numbers. And I'd love to see what the viewing figures are as well, or what sort of the percentages, because they don't like giving specific numbers, do they? But giving the percentages for the first 6 seasons of the Clone Wars, it's got to have bumped interest up in those as well. Season 2 Mando, you think, would give it a similarly big bump, because almost, not completely, there's always people grumbling and complaining on Twitter about this, that or the other, but I would say almost universally Mandalorian was well accepted and well received. But Disney have also got fairly soon, they've got the Marvel stuff starting up. That's going to give them a bump in subscriptions, and I think as time goes on, people will realise the depth of what's out there on Disney. I mean, we certainly have. We've started mooching around a lot more. We got it because of Mandalorian. There was no way we weren't going to pay £6 a month so we could see Mandalorian. And of course, we got it later here in the UK. We didn't get it till, when was it? March, April? It was a bit later.
Middle of March,
Yeah, but now we're all going to be on the same playing field for season 2 and everything else going forward. Just stunning. Lucasfilm and Disney must be so thrilled with those numbers, because that's dominating that particular graph. If you go onto the site, we actually posted an article. We'll put it in the show links, but just complete domination on that chart.
Yeah, and linking to this, the Mandalorian has earned itself 15 nominations for the Emmys, so that's no small feat either. And actually, if you look down the different nominations, so you've got outstanding costumes, sound editing, character voiceover, production design, single camera picture editing for a drama series, and all these various different ones. These aren't just for one episode, but it lists which episode it's been nominated for, and I'm pretty sure it covers all 8 episodes.
It doesn't, and I'll tell you which one. No, it doesn't. It misses out episode 5, The Gunslinger.
Does it really?
It's the only episode that doesn't get a nod, which ironically and weirdly is the one where they went back to Tatooine. Which was the
funny.
most, not the most satisfying, but in terms of touching base with old stuff that we're very familiar with, and just giving us that endorphin kick from that's the Macquarie painting and that's the Macquarie painting, and that's Docking Bay, and all this stuff. That was the one episode that didn't get a nod, which surprised me. But I suppose if you think about it, a lot of the design in The Gunslinger was stuff we'd seen before. We'd seen the Macquarie painting 40 years ago. We'd seen the Docking Bay. We knew what it looked like. We'd seen pit droids before. There was really, in that one episode, not an awful lot that was new. So I kind of get it.
That's it, because actually just going down the list now on the Emmys.com, the actual series gets a nomination for Outstanding Drama Series.
Yeah.
And then there's like a guest actor nomination for Giancarlo Esposito. A lot of these are for more technical awards, which is what Star Wars tends to get nominated for.
Sure.
Production design, character voiceover, sound editing, costumes, and makeup. And so that kind of does make sense. That would ring true with what you're saying about the fact that Chapter 5 was the only one which didn't receive a nomination, because, like you said, a lot of it was very much in the style that we've already seen. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that The Gunslinger is not a good episode.
Oh, I
really liked it.
love that episode. Love that episode.
Yeah, unless, of course, the Emmys nomination boards don't like fan service nods and stuff like that.
Well, I mean, come on, Tor Calican should have got a nomination just for being the most annoying gunslinger ever. But it was written that way. He was supposed to be a cocky, arrogant, whatever. I thought it was ace.
Yeah, exactly. Somebody actually showed a graphic of this the other day, and it was like basically just a thumbnail of different characters from all these different films, and it basically just said, if these characters annoy you, then the actor's done their job.
Yes.
Arguably, the one that was an issue with was the fact that they had Anakin Skywalker from Revenge of the Sith, where for me, it's Anakin Skywalker from Attack of the Clones who annoys the hell out of me.
Yes.
Yeah, but, you know, then if I had all these different other characters like Dolores Umbridge from Harry Potter, she was on there. And I can remember watching that and thinking, oh my God, if somebody doesn't just put that character out of misery, I'm going to walk into the screen and do it myself. So there you go. I mean, it's funny, isn't it, how kind of go, oh, that character's annoying, but then you forget that that's how they've been written and been written for a reason. Exactly that. They're playing the role exactly as they're meant to. That's what they're supposed to be doing. Talk Alec, I say it half in jest, but, you know, he was supposed to be that cocky, arrogant, I know it all, and then you learn throughout the 45 minutes he really doesn't know that much. He probably knew enough, but then doesn't come to a particularly good ending, does he, at the end of the show? So, no, I love that episode. Huge congratulations to The Mandalorian and to Star Wars Resistance as well, which got a nod. Great day for Star Wars. And just one thing, I think Esposito getting the nod for Best Supporting Actor. I could be wrong. Please email in and correct me if I am. But as far as I know, in terms of live action, the only other actor to be nominated for a major award, a major honour, you know, outside of a Saturn or, you know, a sci-fi specific award, but actually a general acting award. The only other Star Wars actor I think that's ever been nominated was Alec Guinness for A New Hope. So if that is the case, and I'm just saying that from memory, so I could be wrong, but if that is the case, then huge congratulations to Giancarlo Esposito, because that's quite a little landmark. I suppose if we're going to pick up this, you do have Taika Waititi. He's been nominated for a voiceover performance as well. Yeah. But then we've had David Tennant won Daytime Emmy, didn't he? Yeah. He did, exactly. So I think this voiceover performance is a new category for this year. Yeah. And I think actually that's quite interesting because it's more to do with a voicing a character in a live action setting. And so that makes it interesting because it's not going to be dominated by animation series and stuff like that. It's purely for live action.
You're listening to Fantha Tracks. Flip through the galaxy of literature with Cannon Fodder hosts Brian Cameron, Matt Booker, Mark Newbold, and Mark Mulcaster.
Count me in.
Spin round the rim with Desert Planet Discs. Your musical journey through the space lanes with your hosts, Carl Bayless and Greg Robertson.
The hottest tunes this side of Mos Eisley. Happy!
Get the latest news, interviews, reviews, and much more on Making Tracks with your hosts, Mark Newbold and Mark Mulcaster.
Like an Ewok battle wagon out of control.
Join hosts Claire Henry and a rotating panel of guest hosts for the podcast that's full of hope. Planet Leia.
I love you.
I know.
It's time to head south with the Fantha from Down Under, Adam O'Brien.
Oh, g'day, mate. How you going?
Start your engines with Paul Naylor and Mark Newbold as they lift the hood on starships, airspeeders, swoops, capital ships, and more from across the cosmos. And for everything in one location, daily news, reviews, interviews, podcasts, video, and social media feeds. Bookmark FanthaTracks.com for Star Wars news 24/7, 365.
On August 21st, the Hasbro Pulse Fan First Friday is coming to Facebook in a Star Wars live stream. The guys and girls at Hasbro are bringing their latest Fan First Friday event basically to Facebook, and that will kick off from 3 to 3:30 p.m. British Summer Time, or nice and early in the morning if you're in the US, so 10 to 10:30. The stream will include a question and answer session with the Hasbro Star Wars brand team. So, Mark, have you got any questions you'd want to ask the Hasbro guys?
It feels like we've had a lot of really good Black Series news lately. Recently, with the Vintage Collection, we had the news of the Target exclusive Millennium Falcon Galaxy's Edge version, you know, with the Galaxy's Edge sounds and Smuggler's Run sounds and such, that was available over here through Zavi, I believe, which is great news. But yeah, I think, as ever, 3 3/4 to me is always going to be the baseline for Star Wars toys, because that was where it all really started going back in the day. So I just want to know if there's more good sort of Vintage Collection stuff.
The two main are the Black Series and the Vintage Collection, and I think both, especially the vehicles, are being focused towards the collectors, because there probably will be some parents out there who are going to put down $400 or £400 for the Falcon for their kids, but that's the price of a sideshow statue or a really good Hot Toys figure. So it's, you know, we're not talking about just kind of mass-produced crap, really, I don't think. one thing that annoys me at the moment, just with the vintage collection figures, is just the quality of the card they use on the card backs.
Yeah.
It's really thin, it bends, and is prone to creasing. And I mean, I've received several figures over the last year or so where the figures have come like that in the shippers. So the shippers are actually in mint condition, but actually you open them up and the cards all kind of slightly crease them out.
I saw a chat thread that you were talking about this on, and you referred to it as, was it veining?
Yeah, veining. So it's basically where you kind of have a crease, but it's not all the way through the card. So it just kind of wrinkles the top layers of the card. I mean, obviously, if you're into collecting original vintage figures and stuff, that's one of those things that is quite prevalent just because of the age. But with modern figures, you shouldn't really have to have that. And, you know, speaking to the distributor that I bought it from, they said that like 98% of those figures, and it was the Boba Fett reissue, have had that issue. Spoke to a couple of my other collector friends who have brought them. Out of the 5 figures that we've all brought, only one of them hasn't had a crease in it, which is just a little bit annoying. If you're kind of like mint on card collector, you want your cards to be mint as well.
Given Hasbro, especially with the vintage collection and that line, I mean, one of the things that they've said is that if you buy them, we'll make them. And clearly people aren't buying them, so they're not making them, which is a perfectly fair business decision to make. You can market companies and promote new products on nostalgia, but if they're not selling, then that's not going to cut it, you know. And you can look at a lot of toy lines going back, especially in Star Wars, where the expectation is, why aren't you making a, you know, insert name here figure? It's outrageous that you've not made a insert name here figure. And it's like, well, we made that 20 years ago and it's sat on the peg, so we're not going to waste the plastic on it again because nobody wants it, you know. And you've got to respect that. I think they try and do via Hasbro Pulse, they give you options for different things, you know, certain vehicles that if you put the sail barge out on general sale, what a huge risk that would have been for Hasbro, but they do it through Pulse. And it hits its target like crazy, and there you go. And they've just done it again with the Marvel Sentinel, you know, $300+ figure that you wouldn't put that out in Smith's Toys or The Entertainer. It's just going to sit there because of the price point. But then they do it on Hasbro Pulse, and they hit their target in less than a day, sort of thing. So I think Hasbro have got a lot of avenues now that they can get the right product out to the right people in the right way, because it kind of feels exclusive now, doesn't it?
It does a bit. I mean, and it's like you said, the Jabba sail barge out, which was, what, $500? And at the time we thought it was a risk. And now they've just put out a $400 Millennium Falcon, which I don't collect the vintage collection vehicles. I just collect the cards just because they are quite expensive, and they're also of a size that I'd want to have out, but I just don't have any space to display them. Other people buy them and live through their excitement vicariously. But yeah, you know, so they put the Falcon out, which there's been, I don't know how many versions of the Falcon out throughout the years, at a price point which is actually quite high. And I think there's always been kind of demand for like a sail barge, because that's never been released. But if Hasbro got to the point now where they feel comfortable that they can shift for the number of Falcons in the commercial market, then that's quite reassuring. At least looking at the vintage collection, a lot of those I had to jump on pretty early on and pre-order because they do seem to sell out. So they're either reducing the number that they're producing, and which is why they're not getting to the bricks and mortar store. Actually, there is a decent demand for them. You hear a lot of talk about the 3 3/4 inch line is doomed, but hopefully not yet anyway. But then, you know, you look at the Black Series and those figures, and the packaging's really nice. The new artwork that they've done, which we've spoken about in previous episodes, does look very engaging. The vintage figure collections, they basically just play, like you say, we're playing with nostalgia. They're playing with nostalgia for the collectors who were around back in the 80s. Obviously, that nostalgia is only going to work for collectors of a certain age, I think. Yeah. And I think, do they resonate with the younger audience or the parents who are just buying the figures for their kids? And are they at a price point that they're accessible, which is why they've done, I guess, all these different scales and various different kind of like looks and stuff.
The 6 inch seems to work for everyone. There's a playability with the toys. There's an attractiveness with the packaging. It seems to work across. That's the one line that seems to work across the range, whereas the vintage collection now, to me, feels, especially now they don't do the movie line like they didn't do a Rise of Skywalker movie line of figures like they've done for every other film, which still blows me away.
It bums me out.
Yeah. To not see the 9 out did seem odd, but you know, again, I kind of get it. But that being said, the vintage collection feels more like a collector's line now, which takes me back to your point about the veining on the Boba Fett card. that would be a question. You know, where's the quality control in terms of the packaging? Because if you're if you're a collector, a vintage collector, a vintage collection collector, but an older collector, let's say, maybe not a kid that's going to pull them off the packaging isn't as throwaway as it might be for a Galactic Heroes figure or whatever else it might be. That's got to be a consideration as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it absolutely does. And I suppose there's probably a price reason for it. But then if it is being targeted at other collectors, I guess it's one of those things there, you know, if we want the quality and we're prepared to pay for it, then they should consider increasing the quality of the packaging and stuff. It's like everything, trying to find a original Return of the Jedi carded figure now which hasn't got a yellow bubble. I guess you just accept that you're probably not going to be able to find many or any, really. You know, there's a strong market for them.
Hello, I'm Warwick Davis, and you're listening to Fantha Tracks.
So that's all we've got time for episode 49 of Making Tracks. Mark, how can people get in touch?
Well, if people want to get in touch, they can be a part of the action and stay updated on all the latest Star Wars news. Visit fanthatracks.com or check out the Fantha Tracks app through the App Store and follow us on your mobile device. You can reach out to us and send in your listeners' questions by emailing radio@fanthatracks.com. And this is the important bit now. Comment, like and share on any of our social media feeds of Fantha Tracks. Be sure to subscribe, leave a review, preferably a 5-star one. And if you do, you'll get a shout out. So, given that, we're going to give a shout out to Obi-Wan Cass and Jedi Al for giving us nice reviews on Apple Podcasts. So many thanks to the guys for that. That's where you can leave your reviews. Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast or smart speaker of choice. Make it a 5-star one and we will be forever in your debt and you'll get a shout out on the show. Make sure you're back here next week for episode 50 of Making Tracks. It's our 50th studio episode and very much looking forward to it. Are you looking forward to it, Mark?
I am, yes. Hopefully we'll have a bit of a party.
We better have a party. I'm bringing the cake, you can bring everything else.
I'll bring the jelly and the ice cream.
Sounds like a plan.
Take care, mate.
Coming up next on Fantha Tracks Radio, it's Cannon Fodder.